I'm Rachel Donovan. I'm 36, a pediatric nurse in Madison, Wisconsin, and a single mom to two amazing kids. Most years, I don't have time to think much about the holidays, too many night shifts, too many bills. But last Christmas, it changed everything. It started with a thick, gold-edged envelope arriving in the mail. My sister Victoria's handwriting, elegant and unmistakable, curled across the front like it belonged on the cover of Vogue. Inside was a formal invitation to her annual Christmas Eve gala in Palo Alto, the kind of event where people wear designer labels you only ever see in fashion editorials, the kind of event that's not usually for people like me. Still, I smiled. My kids, Mason and Lily, were ecstatic. Mason, my little engineer, started building a drone to show Uncle Ethan, Victoria's husband and a tech CEO with more patents than I can count. Lily, just 9, practiced her carol solos every night, dreaming of performing in her aunt's grand living room under the chandelier. Then, 2 weeks before the event, my phone rang. "Rachel," Victoria said, her voice clipped and cool. "I just wanted to touch base about the party." "Sure," I said, balancing a clipboard and a juice box mid-shift at the hospital. "We're all excited. Mason's even working on a special—" "Actually," she cut in, "I was hoping you'd come alone. Ethan's investors are flying in from Tokyo and Zurich. The house will be curated. I just think having kids there might be a distraction." I paused, thinking I must have misheard her. "You want me to come without Mason and Lily?" "They're wonderful," she said quickly. "Of course. But they're not used to this kind of crowd. It's a very specific atmosphere. I need everything to go perfectly." I didn't respond at first, because if I had, I would have said things I'd regret. Instead, I let her talk. I let her explain how appearances mattered. How her future as a tech society hostess was riding on this one night. And how I, apparently, was the acceptable part of my family. My children were not. When I finally hung up, I just sat in my car, numb. My fingers were shaking, my chest tight, because this wasn't just a party, this was about dignity, about family. And for the first time, I saw the truth. My sister, the woman I once helped through college, whose wedding I partially funded, whose emergencies I'd bailed out of for over a decade, she now saw me as a liability. Worse, she saw my children as embarrassing. That night, after tucking Mason and Lily into bed, I poured a glass of wine and called my best friend, Elena. "She actually said that?" Elena gasped. "After everything you've done for her?" I nodded, biting my lip. I don't know what to do. Mason's making this drone by hand. Lily's memorized every carol." "They're so excited." Elena didn't hesitate. "Then you go, all of you. And if she can't handle her own sister showing up with love, grace, and kids in tow, that's her problem, not yours." I slept on it, then woke up the next morning with a decision made. We were going, not just to attend a party, but to take back something more important. Our place. Our worth. Our voice. Growing up, Victoria and I shared everything. Bedroom walls covered in glow-in-the-dark stars, cheap pink bicycles with plastic streamers, and long nights talking about dreams under a shared blanket. We were the Donovan girls, daughters of a high school history teacher and a mom who ran the local library. We didn't have much, but what we had was stable, safe. Even then, though, the cracks were visible. I was the fixer, the planner. I read to the younger kids in church and knew I wanted to work in medicine since I was 10. Victoria, she wanted out of Madison, out of hand-me-downs. Out of anything that smelled like ordinary. At 13, she declared she would never marry anyone who made under 6 figures. "I want the kind of life where I never check price tags," she said, flipping through a fashion magazine she bought with babysitting money. Our mom gave her a weary smile. Dad just shook his head. In high school, she dated the guy with the fancy car, while I worked weekends at the assisted living center to save for nursing school. She got a part-time modeling gig. I pulled biology flashcards between bus rides. Still, we were close. When she didn't get into her dream school, she cried in my lap for an hour. When her prom date dumped her, I drove her in my beat-up Saturn to Dairy Queen and told her she was too good for him anyway. I never thought that gap between us would become a chasm. After college, paid mostly through scholarships and relentless hours in the pediatrics wing, I came back to Madison and started work at County Memorial. I was 24, exhausted, and proud. Meanwhile, Victoria had dropped out after 2 semesters at a private university in Arizona, citing creative burnout and toxic professors. She resurfaced 6 months later with Ethan Callaway, a recent Stanford grad turned startup wizard, and a diamond ring big enough to blind a small country. The wedding was a spectacle. Garden estate in Napa Valley, string quartet, imported orchids. Our parents couldn't contribute much, so I offered everything I had, my $5,000 emergency fund. It paid for the centerpieces she insisted were non-negotiable. "You'll get it back," she'd promised. "Ethan and I are going to be huge. We'll fly you and the kids to Paris someday." I smiled. I believed her. Over the next decade, that Paris promise turned into a series of "just until we get through this rough patch" requests. An unexpected tax bill here, a missed car payment there, and always with a teary phone call, always with assurances it was the last time. I never said no. How could I? She was my sister. Meanwhile, my life became a rotating shift cycle. Hospital days, nursing home nights, school pickups in between. When Mason had pneumonia at age 6, I skipped sleep for 48 hours straight. When Lily broke her arm falling off the monkey bars, I stitched her stuffed bear to calm her down in the ER waiting room. Victoria's life. Instagram perfect. Lavish vacations, marble countertops, charity galas, and custom gowns. She'd tag me sometimes. So proud of my big sis, saving lives while I slay tech life. It looked sweet to her followers, but they didn't see the Venmo requests, the midnight PayPal transfers, the frantic "can you spot me for the retreat deposit" messages. My kids adored her. They thought Aunt Vicky was magical. "She lives in a castle," Lily said once, twirling in a dress Victoria had sent from Saks. I didn't have the heart to tell her that I'd footed the shipping cost. But the Christmas invitation, then the phone call, that was different. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about shame. About exclusion. About drawing a line in the snow and saying, you stay on that side. And I realized for the first time in years, maybe I should. The night after Victoria called, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the heater and the occasional creak of the old house settling. But my mind was loud, louder than it had been in years. Her words kept replaying, sharp and clinical like a scalpel. "Come alone." Not the right fit. It's a curated atmosphere. She hadn't even tried to sugarcoat it. No pretense of concern for the kids' comfort, no fabricated excuse about limited space or travel logistics. Just a direct order. My children weren't welcome in her world anymore. By morning, I'd convinced myself I must have misunderstood, that there was some nuance I missed, that surely my sister didn't mean to suggest Mason and Lily were beneath her. But when I texted her asking if she really meant for me to come alone, the response was one word: yes. No explanation, no apology. Just a cold affirmation. Later that day, while I was prepping school lunches, Mason walked into the kitchen holding a box wrapped in silver paper with duct tape on one corner. "I finished it," he said proudly. I paused. "Finished what, bud?" "The drone for Uncle Ethan. I programmed the GPS to follow facial recognition." "Like in his old TED Talk." I stared at him. My son, who built his own circuit boards from online tutorials, who had saved up from mowing lawns to buy extra parts from Radio Shack's clearance shelf, was beaming. All because he wanted to impress a man who didn't even know the truth behind his wife's curated Christmas. "That's amazing, honey," I said, fighting the lump rising in my throat. Lily skipped in moments later, still in her snowflake pajamas. "Can we practice my solo again, Mom?" "I want it to be perfect when I sing in Aunt Vicky's house, with the stairs." "The stairs?" I asked. She nodded enthusiastically. "She said I could stand on the spiral one and sing like a princess." I blinked. Spiral staircase? I didn't remember that detail. "She told me last time," Lily continued. "She said her house was built for grand entrances." And just like that, the pain sharpened. Not just for me, but for them. They didn't know they'd been uninvited. They didn't know their aunt had decided they weren't presentable enough. To them, this was still magic. This was sparkle and hope and believing in people they loved. I wanted to shield them from the truth, but I also knew I had to decide. Later that evening, after dinner, I sat down in the living room with the kids and tried to speak. "Hey," I began, my voice tight, "about Aunt Vicky's party." "Are we leaving early this year?" Mason asked. "So we don't miss the light show?" Lily gasped. "Did she add the chocolate fountain again?" They were glowing. I couldn't do it. I couldn't tell them the truth. "Not yet." Instead, I said, "We'll see how it goes, but just remember, Aunt Vicky likes everything to be very organized. So let's remember our very best manners, okay?" They both nodded seriously, as if preparing for royal protocol. That night, I called Elena again. "She doesn't deserve to see them," I whispered. "But they deserve to go." Elena didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, "Then take them, but go as yourself. Not as someone trying to shrink down so she can fit into your sister's Pinterest perfect frame." That was the moment I knew what I had to do. If Victoria wanted her party to be flawless, she'd have to learn what real family looked like, because I wasn't leaving my kids behind, not for her approval, not for her image, not for anyone. They were coming. And we would walk through those fancy iron gates with our heads held high, our gifts wrapped with love, our clothes clean and pressed, even if they came from a second-hand shop, because respect isn't about price tags. It's about presence, and that year we were going to show up. The next few days were a strange blur of motion and emotion. We were going. That decision was final. But every step I took to prepare, every errand, every list, every dollar spent, was weighed down by a heavy question that wouldn't go away. Was I doing the right thing? On Thursday afternoon, I stopped by a secondhand boutique near the hospital. The kind of place where people donate barely worn designer pieces after one photo shoot or fundraiser. It was tucked behind a florist shop, unassuming and quiet. I found a crisp navy blazer for Mason, slim fit, just his size, and a satin dress in forest green for Lily. It had a tiny snag near the hem, barely visible. She would love it. For myself, I chose a simple black sheath dress, classic. Safe, unapologetic. The woman at the register smiled when she saw the tags. "Big event?" she asked, folding the dress carefully. I hesitated. "Family gathering," I said simply. "Complicated." She nodded knowingly and slipped a tiny gold hair clip into the bag. "For the little girl, on the house." Back home, Lily twirled in her dress like a fairy, the clip sparkling in her blonde hair. "Do I look fancy enough for Aunt Vicky's house?" she asked, her eyes wide and hopeful. "You look like the best part of Christmas," I replied, pulling her into a hug. Mason, meanwhile, was tightening the screws on his drone again, triple-checking every circuit. "Uncle Ethan's gonna love this," he said, his voice full of that innocent certainty only a child can carry. "Do you think he'll let me fly it in the backyard?" "Maybe," I said, swallowing the lump rising in my throat. They were so full of joy, of trust, of hope, and I felt like a fraud. Because they didn't know what I knew, that we weren't wanted there, that their aunt had already judged them unworthy of the guest list, that every moment they imagined, gifts, laughter, music, was built on a lie I hadn't found the courage to shatter. Friday night, I couldn't sleep again. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of chamomile tea, scrolling through my notes app. I had written 3 versions of what I might say to Victoria if things went sideways. Version 1, calm. Victoria, this isn't okay. We're family. You don't get to rewrite that. Version 2, brutal honesty. You used me for years and now you want to erase my kids. That's not happening. Version 3, the nuclear option. Tell them the truth or I will. But none of it felt right, because it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me, about how I wanted to show up, not in defense. Not in anger, but with dignity, for my kids. The next morning, I gathered Mason and Lily for a practice breakfast. Pancakes, juice, forks, and napkins in proper order. Okay, I said, sitting across from them. Let's pretend we're at a fancy dinner. What do we do if someone says something that feels not so nice? Lily frowned. Like what? Like if someone says your dress is too shiny, I offered gently, or that your toy looks homemade. Mason looked up from his plate. Why would they say that? I hesitated. Sometimes people forget how to be kind, but that doesn't mean you stop being kind. You just remember that their words say more about them than about you. Lily nodded slowly. So, smile and stay calm? Exactly, I said, pride welling up despite the ache in my chest. You already know how to handle hard things. Later that day, we wrapped our gifts. Mason placed his drone in a repurposed laptop box padded with tissue. He wrote, "To Uncle Ethan, from your future CTO," on the tag. Lily used recycled wrapping paper covered in glittery stars for her hand-painted ornament. I watched them carefully fold corners, tie bows, and beam with anticipation. And I realized something important. This wasn't about protecting them from disappointment. It was about preparing them for life. Because the world won't always applaud their efforts, it won't always accept their love or recognize their value, but I could teach them this. Their worth isn't dependent on someone else's recognition. And that lesson, I decided, was more valuable than any Christmas magic their aunt could fake. Christmas Eve arrived cloaked in quiet snow, the kind that blanketed the streets in silver and hushed even the noisiest neighborhoods. Our breath fogged the windows as we drove, the kids whispering carols and pointing out lit-up reindeer and blinking Santas on front lawns. But as we neared Palo Alto, the world changed. Gone were the inflatable snowmen and homemade light displays. In their place, manicured hedges shaped like angels, uniform white lights strung by professionals, and driveways lined with black SUVs. Everything looked curated, polished, cold. Then we reached Victoria's house, or should I say, estate. The gates opened automatically, scanning our license plate before allowing us in. A uniformed valet directed me toward a guest parking section. I parked between a Tesla Model X and a Bentley that probably cost more than my house. The kids pressed their noses to the glass. "It's huge," Mason whispered. "It looks like a palace," Lily added. I smiled tightly. "Let's go be royalty then." As we walked up the stone steps, I clutched our gifts and the tray of cranberry bars I baked from Mom's old recipe. Lily's dress rustled like leaves in the breeze, and Mason carried his drone box like a sacred offering. Before we could knock, the front door swung open. Victoria stood there, framed by a chandelier and the glow of a 20-foot tree behind her. She looked perfect. Her hair swept into an elegant chignon, her red velvet dress hugging her like it was made just for her. Diamonds glittered at her ears and throat, but her smile? That was the only thing off. It didn't reach her eyes. "Oh," she said, pausing a beat too long. Rachel, everyone. Not Mason and Lily. Not hi, sweethearts. Just everyone, like we were an entourage she wasn't expecting. She stepped aside. Come in. As we walked past her, I felt her eyes scan us like security at a VIP event. Inside, the air smelled of cinnamon and something expensive I couldn't name. Servers in white gloves passed champagne flutes on silver trays. A live string quartet played near the fireplace, and the guests, a sea of silk, cashmere, and carefully styled indifference. Victoria leaned toward me as she took my coat. I thought we agreed, she whispered. No, I said quietly. You stated I never agreed. Before she could respond, Ethan appeared, Victoria's husband, tall and affable in a classic tux. His face lit up when he saw Mason and Lily. Well, look who we have here, he said warmly, crouching to Mason's level. Is that the drone you emailed me about? Mason's eyes widened. You saw my message? Absolutely, Ethan grinned. I forwarded it to my head of engineering. Victoria blinked. You did? Ethan smiled at her. Sure did. Kids got ideas. She quickly recovered, turning to Lily. Darling, your dress is bright. Lily looked up, unsure if that was a compliment. I gently squeezed her hand. Come, Victoria said, her tone clipped. Let me show you where to place those. She motioned to our gifts like they were wet umbrellas. As we followed her through the great room, I noticed a small table marked Family Gifts. I placed our presents there, next to a row of silver boxes clearly purchased in bulk. Just as I was about to guide the kids toward the cookie table, Victoria pulled me aside. There's a media room downstairs, she said. Other children are watching movies there. Mason and Lily were hoping to be part of the party, I said evenly. There are no other kids in the main room, Rachel. Then I guess they'll be the first. Her lips thinned. Let's keep things graceful tonight. I met her eyes. That depends on you. As we rejoined the crowd, I saw Lily approach the tree with wide eyes. Can I hang this? She asked, holding out her glittery ornament. Victoria glanced at it, then at the tree, perfectly color-coordinated in gold and white. Oh, sweetheart, she said, voice like porcelain. The decorator followed a strict palette. Let's put that on the family tree in the den. She plucked the ornament delicately and handed it off to a server without another word. Lily blinked. Okay. I saw Mason's jaw tighten. He said nothing, but his posture stiffened. It had begun. Victoria wasn't going to yell. She wasn't going to throw tantrums. No. Her weapon of choice was subtle degradation, served on a silver platter and wrapped in civility. But I'd come prepared, and if she thought I would let her chip away at my children's spirit one fake smile at a time, she had no idea who she was dealing with. Dinner was announced with the gentle chime of crystal, delicate, precise, and somehow ominous. Victoria floated into the center of the room with practiced elegance, her voice sweetened just enough to sound gracious without any actual warmth. Everyone, if you'll please make your way to the dining hall, she said. Chef Emile has outdone himself this year. Mason leaned in. Chef? Like, a real one? I nodded. Let's just do our best to enjoy the food, okay? We walked into a space that looked like it had been ripped straight from a lifestyle magazine. A long, lacquered table stretched beneath a vaulted ceiling, dripping in gold chandeliers and candles that didn't dare flicker. Every place setting was arranged with military precision. Crystal stemware, gold-rimmed plates, and calligraphed name cards written in swirling cursive, except for 3 seats. There were no cards for us. Victoria appeared beside me, faking a surprised pout. Oh no! It looks like the calligrapher must have missed a few names, since you weren't originally. She trailed off, but the damage was done. People around us exchanged quick glances. Before I could speak, Ethan stepped in. "No problem," he said easily, waving to the server. "We've got space right here between me and Mom." The server scrambled to bring 3 extra place settings, completely mismatched from the rest. Silver instead of gold, different napkin fold, clearly not part of the plan. Message received. Mason and Lily settled in, still oblivious to the snubs, while I sat between Ethan's mother and a man whose cologne hit like a truck. The first course arrived, squash bisque with truffle foam and something the server described as air-dried pear chips. Mason sniffed it cautiously. Lily, always the braver one, dug in. As we sipped, conversation floated around us. Ski resorts, startup valuations, silent auction wins. I tried to stay invisible. But Victoria had other plans. "So," she said suddenly, gesturing to me, "my sister is a nurse. Pediatric care. Isn't that just so grounding?" A woman across the table tilted her head. "That must be intense." "It is," I said simply. "But there's nothing more rewarding." "Rachel's always been the practical one," Victoria continued. "She's great with logistics. I always say she's the one who made sure our Christmases happened at all, while I brought the sparkle." There it was. The subtle divide. The insinuation that I was useful, but she was special. "Rachel also raised these 2 on her own," Ethan's mother added suddenly, her voice soft but firm. "And they're lovely." Victoria's smile tightened like a drawstring purse. The main course came, herb-crusted lamb, some kind of root puree, and vegetables arranged like art. Mason tried to cut his meat and accidentally sent a pea flying. It landed in front of Victoria. She picked it up with 2 manicured fingers, holding it like a used tissue. "Children," she said with a brittle chuckle, always adding a little chaos to the table. Lily's cheeks flushed red. "I'm sorry, Aunt Vicky," she whispered. "Oh, sweetheart," Victoria said with a faux sweet voice. "I'm sure it's not your fault. Public schools just don't teach table manners like they used to." The table went silent. I gripped my wine glass tighter. Across from me, Ethan shot his wife a sharp look. "That's enough," he said quietly. Victoria smiled, wide and fake. "Just teasing, love." By dessert, an elaborate chocolate soufflé with raspberry glaze, I had gone fully numb, but she wasn't done. She stood, gently clinking her glass. "Before we do the gift exchange," she said, "I want to thank everyone for making tonight so elegant. It's so important that we create spaces that reflect excellence, that elevate tradition." She paused just long enough to glance at me. "Of course, I believe in family too, even when it's unconventional." Laughter, polite, forced, but it stung like a slap. Then came the hostess gift opening. A tradition, she said, for intimate guests. Each present had been pre-selected, passed along with rehearsed praise. Finally, she reached mine. "Oh," she said, turning it over. "From my sister?" "Handmade, I believe." She tore the paper and pulled out the scarf, hand-dyed silk in rich, earthy hues from a local artisan I adored. Victoria held it up like it might be infested with fleas. "Very bohemian," she said. "Perfect for gardening." I heard Mason suck in a breath. Lily's lower lip quivered. And that's when I knew we were done shrinking. Silence followed Victoria's bohemian gardening scarf comment. A few guests chuckled politely, not quite sure if they were laughing at the joke or at me. Lily looked down at her lap. Mason clenched his jaw, trying to play it cool but blinking too fast. That was enough. I stood. At first, no one noticed. Then a few eyes turned. Then more. "I'd like to propose a toast," I said, raising my champagne flute. Victoria's head snapped toward me. Her smile faltered just slightly. "Rachel, that's not really—" But I had already started. I want to thank Victoria and Ethan for hosting such an elegant evening, I said, my voice steady. Everything is beautiful, especially the effort to maintain appearances. A nervous laugh rippled through the room. I continued. For those who don't know, I'm Rachel. I'm Victoria's older sister. I'm also a pediatric nurse, a single mom, and, fun fact, I've been Victoria's financial safety net for over 15 years. Gasps. Actual gasps. Ethan looked sharply at his wife. What? I kept going. You see, behind every spa membership, luxury bag, and spontaneous charity auction win is usually a text message to me, just until the bonus comes in. This dress is a must-have for Ethan's launch party. I swear this is the last time. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. In the past 5 years alone, I've transferred over $180,000 to help her maintain this image. That's not including the 10 years before that. If anyone wants receipts, I have them organized by category: clothing, events, lifestyle maintenance. Someone choked on their wine. I paid for the flowers at this wedding, I added, and the honeymoon suite, and the deposit for the Tesla she said was a professional image necessity. Meanwhile, I've been skipping vacations, eating ramen, and taking double shifts. Victoria finally found her voice. Rachel, stop, you're making a scene. No, I said, louder now, I'm making a statement. Because tonight, my kids were belittled, their gifts dismissed, their presence treated like an inconvenience. All by a woman whose entire life has been underwritten by the same low-class family she's so desperate to outgrow. Victoria's face went pale. Around the room, people stared at her. Some whispered. Some just watched, frozen. I turned to Ethan. I assumed you knew, I said gently. She told me this was temporary, that you were building a business, that you'd pay me back once the IPO hit. But now, watching you tonight, I see you're as in the dark as I was. Ethan stood slowly. Is that true? He asked his wife. His voice was ice. Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. It wasn't like that. Rachel's twisting. I'm not, I said, holding up the phone. Here. $3,200 for a networking retreat in Tahoe. $4,800 for a private trainer she claimed was medically necessary. Last month, $2,000 for Christmas aesthetic design. That was after she told me my children weren't welcome. Gasps again. Louder. She told you what? Ethan's mother asked, scandalized. She asked me to come alone, I said simply. Said Mason and Lily weren't the right fit. Ethan looked like he'd been punched. You used my name to open a credit card, he said slowly, horror dawning on his face. You told me it was a business expense card for the foundation. You've been borrowing from your sister this whole time? Victoria's voice broke. It wasn't like that. I needed help, and Rachel always said yes. I didn't make her. No, I said quietly. You didn't make me. I chose to believe that family meant supporting each other. I just didn't realize support meant silence and erasure. The room had gone completely still. Victoria turned, pleading now. Rachel, please. Not like this, you're humiliating me. No, Vicky, I said. You did that yourself. I'm just done letting you do it to me and my children. I raised my glass one last time. To truth. To real family. And to never again financing someone else's fantasy. I took a sip. It tasted better than any champagne ever had. I turned to Mason and Lily. Let's go. They stood without a word, their backs straight. Lily tucked her ornament under her arm. Mason carried his untouched drone. As we walked past the stunned guests, Ethan stepped forward. Rachel, he said softly, thank you for telling me the truth. I nodded. You deserved it. Behind us, Victoria was frozen in place. For the first time in years, she looked small. Just like that, the facade cracked, and we walked out into the winter night, free. The cold hit us like a wall. As we stepped onto the marble steps of Victoria's estate, the warmth of the house, the soft music, the clinking glasses, the heat of silent judgment, vanished behind us. Snow had begun to fall again, lazy and weightless, dancing under the soft glow of the driveway lights. Our shoes crunched against the salted path as we walked back toward our modest sedan, parked among vehicles worth more than our annual income. I held Mason's hand. Lily clung to her drone box like it was a life raft. We had almost reached the car when I heard it. "Rachel!" The sound of heels slipping against icy stone followed. I turned. Victoria was running toward us, one hand gripping her shawl, the other reaching out. She stumbled, caught herself, and kept going, breath puffing in the cold air like steam from a kettle about to boil over. "Rachel, wait!" I stopped but didn't speak. Mason and Lily looked at me, confused. I opened the car door for them. "Inside," I said gently. "Tablets are in the back. Give me a few minutes, okay?" They obeyed without protest, their eyes wide and solemn. Victoria reached me, panting slightly, the red velvet of her dress now damp with melted snow. "You had no right," she hissed, her voice a mix of fury and panic. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes," I said calmly. "I've finally told the truth." "You humiliated me." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You humiliated yourself when you looked at my daughter like her gift was dirt, when you talked about my son's manners like he was an embarrassment, when you erased 15 years of sacrifice with a smirk and a scarf joke." "It was just teasing," she cried. "You're so dramatic." I laughed, low, humorless. "Dramatic is what you did tonight. You made my children feel small in a room full of strangers. After living off my salary for over a decade." Victoria's face twisted. "You always thought you were better than me." "No," I said. "I thought I could save you." She blinked. "You were always the fragile one, the dreamer, the one who wanted more, and I wanted to help, because that's what big sisters do. But helping became enabling, and enabling became disappearing, until all that was left was your image and my overdraft fees." Her expression faltered, lips parting in a tiny gasp. "I'm scared," she said suddenly, the bravado cracking. "I don't know what to do now." "For starters," I said gently, "tell the truth. To Ethan, to yourself, and maybe one day try to be the sister you pretend to be on Instagram." She looked so lost. Not the queen of curated parties, just a girl from Wisconsin with a dream too big and a heart too scared. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For real," I nodded. "Then start showing it, not to me. To yourself." I turned, opened the driver's side door, and paused. "Merry Christmas, Vicky." As I drove away, I didn't look back. The road home was long and quiet. The snow thickened, softening the edges of the world. In the rearview mirror, I saw Mason glance at Lily, then reach for her hand. And just like that, I knew we'd be okay. No matter how big the mansion, no matter how elegant the table, us, in this car, breathing the same cold air, holding each other through the storm, was what real family looked like. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt light. Unburdened, free. Christmas morning arrived with the scent of cinnamon and the soft padding of feet on hardwood. Mason and Lily had shaken off the chill of the night before, now tearing through wrapping paper with gleeful abandon. Laughter echoed through our modest living room, bouncing off worn walls that had witnessed everything: grief, growth, and now, something like healing. There was no chocolate fountain, no chandelier, just the three of us in fuzzy socks and flannel pajamas, sipping hot cocoa with too many marshmallows and watching Home Alone for the 3rd year in a row. And yet, it felt more like Christmas than any designer-curated gala ever had. Later that afternoon, as the kids played with their new board games and I folded away discarded wrapping paper, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Rachel?" came a voice, tired, soft, familiar. "It's Ethan." I stepped into the kitchen.
Hi. I just wanted to say thank you for last night.
I exhaled slowly.
That wasn't easy.
"I imagine not," he said. Victoria and I talked, really talked, for the first time in maybe ever. And? She confessed. All of it, the loans, the lies. The credit card in my name, she's been hiding things from both of us. My stomach tightened. "I'm sorry." "No," he said firmly. "You have nothing to apologize for. I should have seen it. I didn't want to." Silence stretched for a moment. "We've frozen all shared accounts," he continued. "She's agreed to get professional help, financial therapy, individual counseling. We're selling the house. Downsizing, starting fresh." I blinked. That I hadn't expected. "She's applying for a real job," he added. "Design assistant at an interior firm downtown. Entry level." "She's terrified." "She should be," I said, then softened. But that's how growth begins. We hung up with no promises, no expectations, just a quiet understanding that maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't finished. In the weeks that followed, my life changed in tangible, almost surreal ways. Without the monthly drain of covering Victoria's crises, I was able to cancel my second job. I took Mason to a science camp over winter break. Lily and I signed up for a mother-daughter pottery class every Sunday. I scheduled long overdue repairs to our home heating system and finally opened college savings accounts for both kids, and I started therapy, not because I was falling apart, but because I was finally ready to unpack the years of silent sacrifice I'd convinced myself were just what big sisters do. I learned how my self-worth had become entangled with being needed, how martyrdom had masqueraded as love. One evening, my therapist said, "You taught your children what boundaries look like. That's a legacy more powerful than any inheritance." I believed her. 2 weeks into the new year, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000 and a note in trembling cursive. A start. "I'm sorry. V." I didn't cry, but I sat very still for a long time. I deposited the check, but I didn't reply. I needed consistency, not gestures. Over the next few months, other checks arrived, smaller but steady, accompanied by occasional postcards with sketches of design projects or quotes about rebuilding. I said nothing, until March, when Ethan called again. "She'd like to meet," he said. "Just the two of you, if you're willing." We chose a cafe midway between our homes, neutral ground. Victoria arrived in jeans and a thrifted cardigan, no diamonds, no designer labels. No entourage. She looked human, for the first time in a long time. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "I just want to acknowledge what I broke." I listened, not out of obligation, but because she wasn't asking for anything. She was simply showing up, and sometimes that's where redemption begins. A year later, our lives look very different, not in dramatic, Instagrammable ways, no new houses or sudden windfalls, but in quiet, meaningful ones. Mason now runs a school tech club. Lily sings in the local children's choir, and me, I work one job, I sleep more, I cook real meals again. I laugh more. That Christmas confrontation wasn't just a dramatic moment, it was a declaration, a line in the snow, and crossing it changed everything. I used to think family meant self-sacrifice, that love was measured in how much you endured, but I've learned that love with no boundaries isn't love, it's erosion and respect. It doesn't come from silence, it comes from truth. Victoria has changed, slowly, imperfectly. She still slips, still overcompensates, but she shows up now. She asks about Mason's science fairs. She claps for Lily's off-key carols without correcting her pitch. Last week, she brought over homemade cookies. They were burned. We laughed. I no longer need her to be someone else.
I just need her to be real, and my kids, they saw it all.
Not just the moment I stood up, but the years that led there. The tears, the patience, the breaking point, and the recovery. They saw that even family can wound you and that you're allowed to say, that's enough, and they carry that strength with them now. A few weeks ago, Lily asked, "Do you think Aunt Vicky is happier now that she's not pretending?" I paused. "I think she's learning to be." Mason chimed in. "I think you are too." He was right. So here's what I'll say to you. Whoever you are, wherever you're watching from, if someone in your life makes you feel small, if their love comes with conditions, if you're constantly shrinking so they can shine, you're allowed to stop. Setting boundaries isn't betrayal, it's bravery. You deserve relationships rooted in respect, not guilt, in honesty, not image, in love, not leverage. So I'll leave you with this. Have you ever had to stand up to someone you loved because they forgot how to love you back? Drop your story in the comments. You're not alone. You never were. And if this story spoke to something in you, hit that like button, subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear they're not crazy for walking away from hurt, even when it comes dressed as family. Thanks for listening. And wherever you are, may your holidays be filled with peace, truth, and people who see your worth without you having to prove it.